Mama always said that an M. Night movie was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of the new M. Night Shyamalan film, Knock at the Cabin. And I am somebody that, as many times as he has disappointed me throughout his career, I do consider myself an M. Night fan. I always show up at his movies day one. I am always intrigued. I'm always rooting for the guy. He's given me some of my favorite films of all time, especially his first three. And even his movies that don't necessarily crack my favorites but are still good are always worth checking out because it's always cool to interact with other people and discuss the film and debate back and forth on what you got out of it, what you liked, what you didn't like. He's always one of those filmmakers that no matter what he does, whether good or bad, it's always intriguing. But since his previous film, Old, I disliked so strongly.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
I walked into this one as blind as you possibly could. I didn't know what the plot was. I never watched the trailer. All I knew was that Dave Bautista was in it, and of course it's probably going to be some trippy sci-fi concept or a horror concept because that's where M. Night tends to shine. And so I walked in really hoping this was at least going to fit into the good category of his movies, but a lot of early hype, a lot of early reviews were plugging this movie as his best since Signs. Do I agree with that? Do I think it's his best movie since Signs? Let's get into it. So the basic premise of this film is that you have a group of 4 strangers that come upon this couple and their daughter that are in this isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere. They break in, hold them captive, and sit them down and tell them, "We are here to prevent the apocalypse. Your family has been chosen, and you have to choose to sacrifice one of you, otherwise the world is going to end. We cannot kill one of you, we cannot make the choice for you, and you can't commit suicide. One of you has to murder the other, otherwise humanity is doomed."
Families throughout history have been chosen to make this decision. Your family must choose to willingly sacrifice one of the 3 of you to prevent the apocalypse.
Now, starting off with the positives of this movie, I loved that premise. I was instantly hooked. As soon as that was introduced in the first 10 to 15 minutes, I was like, okay, this is the type of premise I like to see Shyamalan go through. Now, it is derived from a novel that I believe was called The Cabin at the End of the World, and he did have 2 co-writers in this. I don't think that he has often, maybe ever, had co-writers. He's always one of those guys that writes, directs, does the whole shebang himself. But that initial setup, that premise, these 4 strangers, why they are there, what this family has to choose. Do you choose the love of your family, or do you choose the darkness of humanity? Saving everybody that's not only the good people, but also all the shitbags out in the world. Very intriguing question. One of those would you situations that is not an easy question to answer.
We're not sacrificing anyone.
For every no you give us, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die.
And for the most part, I think that they explore that concept in a really interesting way. There are some little surprises and turns along the way with how this group of strangers has to enact the thing that they have been willed to do, what happens every single time this family refuses to make a decision, whenever they point them towards the TV and try to convince them, like, look what's happening, this is real, this is what we're telling you about. It is a movie that keeps you on the edge of your seat and keeps the thrills going because you're experiencing this crazy-ass scenario along with this innocent family, and it just gets progressively weirder. As far as performances, everybody in this movie does a damn good job, but there are 2 standouts that were really impressive in this movie. The first one is Dave Bautista. Now, this is a guy that, up until recently, I have not really taken all that seriously. I've thought that he's been good. He's been solid. He's a guy that when he shows up in a cast, I've enjoyed, but until the last 2 or 3 movies that I've seen him in, I've never really seen him as this wrestler turned serious actor. You know, he's made statements before that he doesn't want to follow in the footsteps of The Rock. He doesn't want to be the summer blockbuster guy. He wants to be a serious actor. He wants to work with filmmakers like Scorsese and Nolan and Villeneuve, and every single project this guy continues to take, he is absolutely doing that. And this movie is easily the best performance that I've seen him give.
We were called and are united by a common vision, which has now become a command that we cannot ignore.
And it's a very against typecast role. Batista is a big, hulking guy. I mean, he fits that wrestler persona to a T. And his character in this movie is very gentle, very soft, very mild-mannered, and very matter-of-fact with the way that he talks, and he is the one who's trying to appeal to everybody's humanity. And so I really liked how he kind of stretched his acting ability in this, and he was the one that I was continuously interested in as the movie went on. I just wanted to see what else Batista could do. The other standout is Rupert Grint, who we all know is Ron Weasley, and I have not seen him do anything outside of the Harry Potter films, and he is fucking awesome in this movie. He doesn't get nearly as much to do as Batista. He doesn't get nearly as much focus as Batista, so I kind of wish we got more for him to kind of give his acting ability in this movie. But what you do get of him, the times where he is the focal point, where he is allowed to talk and kind of shut everybody up and give a performance, he is so damn good to where I really want to see him do some more stuff. Like, Ron, come on, more stuff, please.
Hello, good.
And I want to praise the first act of this film specifically for the camera work and the tension building. There's a lot of interesting shots. There's some like use of Dutch angles and a conversation between Batista and this little girl Wen that really makes you unnerved and makes you uncomfortable. The way that they're setting up this premise with the arrival of these strangers and the response that this family has, and the very awkwardly mild-mannered and almost human interactions that they have, even though they're doing a very horrific thing and a very scary and imposing people with these psychotic looking weapons, they're talking very normal, almost like a church group. Like, there's so much in the first 30 to 40 minutes of this movie with the initial setup that really put me on edge and had me prepared for what I was quickly believing would genuinely be his best film since Signs. Unfortunately, this movie was not a knockout for me. It definitely did not continue to be as good or as engaging or as tense or as interesting as the first third to first half led me to believe the whole film was going to be. First issue that I had is that this is a rated R film and it's only for language. And again, I'm the horror guy. I like some gore. I like things to be a little bit more edgy. And M. Night has done that a couple of times in his past. Typically, he's the little bit more subtle filmmaker when it comes to horror and gore, but he has had some rated R films before. I think this film would have benefited from that. I think it would have increased the intensity of the situations. There are kills, there are bloody moments that are kind of strategically pulled away from, or you get kind of an obscured image, or you just see the aftermath, or you're given suggestion. And sometimes that is really effective. Sometimes that's more effective than showing what's going on. I don't think this is one of those cases. I think this is one of those times where showing us exactly the brutality of what is going on throughout this film would have just increased everything they were trying to achieve. Second issue is that there are some backstory like flashbacks that I felt were really clunky the way that they were incorporated into the film, and I don't think that they served a really valuable purpose in the overall story. I understand by the end of it what all of them collectively was trying to add to the note they decide to end this movie on. I just don't think it was necessary. I don't think that we wouldn't have gotten the point without those flashbacks. And so it kind of sets up the wrong expectation the way that they are utilized and edited into this movie. Most of the film is in this cabin, in this one isolated situation, and it's just these characters interacting and talking with each other. And occasionally you get these little flashback sequences that flesh out some events of the past regarding this couple. And it's one of those times where M. Night Shyamalan's career and the expectations that most, if not all of us have when we walk into an M. Night Shyamalan film actually works against what he is doing here, because all of those flashbacks kind of start to put on that muscle memory that we have from watching his previous films, and you start to expect that they're going to add up to something differently, or they're going to add up to some kind of a reveal, or they're going to subvert our expectations with those things that we are taking at face value, and they're going to end up meaning something totally different. And it's just very straightforward. It's very simple, and it's very on the nose what those flashbacks lead to by the final 5 minutes of this film. And so by the end of it, I just don't feel like they really added anything. They actually probably set up my expectations that made me less receptive to the ending that they decided to go with. And with that being said, I did not really enjoy how this movie wrapped up.
And you blew it!
It really kind of fizzled out for me, ended on a whimper when I feel like a story like this should have actually ended with a bang. And again, something that I think Shyamalan's previous work is going to set up the wrong expectations for, because Typically his movies, for better or worse, sometimes really worse, he goes for a big swing. He goes for a subverted expectation. He goes for, changing how you look at the rest of the events of the film and try to establish a theme or surprise you with something he's trying to convey that's been brewing underneath the surface level story. And this being a very straightforward, by-the-numbers version of storytelling, this is one of his movies where I feel like that did not help it. I feel like we needed some of that classic Shyamalan approach. And it just kind of petered out in the last 10 to 15 minutes to me, to where the whole movie had a pretty solid pace as far as tension, as far as kind of giving you this intense situation that is continuing to ratchet up and get crazier, and you're starting to believe more than you did in the first act. But it's got a very one-note cycle to it, where you have these strangers, they explain the situation. Are you ready to make your sacrifice? No, we're not. Okay, well, here's the repercussions of that. Wash, rinse, repeat. And so by the end of it, when there's not some bang at the end of it, when there's not some big surprise, when there's not some real impactful ending that all of this journey has led to, and it just kind of fizzles out, it kind of taints the rest of your experience a little bit. And that was honestly the biggest issue that I had with the film, was the note that I walked out on going, oh, well, that wasn't as interesting as I think they could have made it in the end. And it's also a completely different ending than the book, apparently. So if you're knowledgeable on the book, don't expect those turn of events to happen. He rewrote the ending, went in a completely different direction. And I read on Wikipedia the ending of the actual book, and I actually think the book ends in a better way. I think that there's a lot more complications to what's going on. There's a lot more avenue for discussion by the end of that ending, and this movie just didn't have that, and I don't know why they decided to do that. So all in all, guys, is this his best film since Signs? I don't think so. This is probably in the middle, as far as I'm concerned, of his movies. It's certainly in the category of the good Shyamalan films, but it's towards the bottom rung of that good category. Really love the performances, love the initial setup and the premise. Just feels like there wasn't enough punch by the third act, when this, if any of Shyamalan's films, really needed that. So if you're a Shyamalan fan, you will probably enjoy this more than most of his films, but go in with tempered expectations. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for the playlist of all of the 2023 new release reviews I've done so far, and I'm also going to put my most recent Shyamalan ranking up here for you to check out as well. Please like and share this video, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.